Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. It is October 1st, 2024. The Jaybefaunt channel is also part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me there on Sundays for the JB show and Thursdays for the Savvy and JB show, so you guys can always see me there. Also, if you guys have not already, please go ahead and do me a favor. Do me a quick favor. All right, go ahead and give a like to the stream. This also signals to the algorithm that you guys like what you're watching and that you guys are well informed. So I appreciate that very much for all of your beautiful participation. Also, if you guys have not already, you guys can actually go to my Substack at jaybefaunt.substack.com. This will alert you to email notifications whenever I go live, upload clips, or write any articles, so you have that ready there for you. Thank you very much for that. Good to see everybody in the chat. All of you that are joining me from YouTube, Rockfin, Twitch. Is Rumble working? I'm trying to check on here and see if Rumble is operational. Is Rumble operational? Yes, it is operational. So we are running on all cylinders. Also good to see all of y'all on Facebook too. All right, good to see you. Now, just to let you guys know, as for everybody that's in the chat, I'm going to say hello to all of you. We will get to all of your greetings and hellos in a little bit. But just to go over a couple of segments that we're going to be doing today. Later in the show today, I will be addressing Roland Martin because Roland Martin has said some things. We're going to have to get into that because Roland Martin is addressing black men, and I happen to be one. Last time I checked. So we're going to have a conversation with Roland Martin. But now we're going to be talking to U.S. Senate candidate Tariq Shabazz from Ohio that's going to be joining us right now. And it's so good to have you on with us, Mr. Tariq Shabazz.
Hey, how's everybody going? Thank you so much for affording me this opportunity to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on. Now, one of the things that I always ask the candidates when they come on this channel is, why are you running for Senate? What is it that you feel that you could change or improve within the United States that we haven't seen before? And just to let you guys know, you are running outside of the duopoly.
All right, absolutely a number of things. Firstly, throughout the United States of America, we have a two-party duopoly that controls all the social, economic, political, and military interests of the United States. And as a result of this is something that we don't take into account, is that how much these parties or factions, they are one and the same as it pertains to international conflict abroad, directly providing more arms in support of tensions, conflict, genocides that are occurring throughout the world. Whereas on a domestic level, they find whatever areas that they bicker on. But however, when it comes still to implementing policy, their policy is abysmal. When it comes to how do you address the fact that 2023 to 2024, you saw the most homeless people in any given year recognized by HUD. When you look at statistics like that, what that illustrates is that we can no longer count on this current structure. This current structure is falling upon itself, and the people who are harmed the most are us, the people. And this is an area where myself as a U.S. Senator, I have a unique background. Firstly, I'm a Black American man who directly descends from individuals who were held in U.S. chattel slavery in this country. So that directly means that I'm going to advocate for what is reparations, to provide that restitution that is directly owed to those individuals who descend from those who were held in U.S. chattel slavery. Also, I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, so I do understand, especially as it pertains to the wars and things of that nature internationally, the importance of us not just talking about we need to safeguard American interests, but we need to truly make sure that we're taking into account the lives that are at stake. I used to say this when I was in the service all the time. Don't call when they used to ask people, hey, we need a body to do something. The term would be a body. And I would say, don't ever call me a body. I'm a human being and I'm a sailor. So don't call me that. And that's one of those things that goes on, that rhetoric, that understanding. Oftentimes it doesn't take into account that we're dealing with human lives at stake as opposed to statistics. And and we're absolutely controlled by the defense industry. And these are areas where I know that as the senator, you won't see someone who's corporate control, and you definitely won't see someone who is controlled by some outside foreign nation that is violating an immense number of our laws, so they can influence our elections. And I'll talk about that in more depth later.
Thank you very much for that. Sorry, I was muted. But one of the things that I like to focus on, and I was telling you this beforehand, is that a lot of times people talk about as far as being a spoiler for the either party. Particularly, a lot of times they'll talk about the Democratic Party, especially if you have policies that are more in a progressive direction. And so I don't want to spend too much time on that. But as far as policy is concerned, I feel like when it comes to looking at candidates, we should focus on the ingredients first, right? And see what's good for that candidate. And feel free to chime in anytime. Okay. But it feels like we spend more time on that than we do on the policies. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, is to talk about your policy platform to show the difference. And a lot of times people will say, well, that's going to spoil it for the Democrats. And it's like, the radical that I am, I say, good.
And I'm going to chime in on that part right here too.
Please.
The Democrats do not own people. I don't understand. Like, this is where I get extremely irate regarding this part of the democratic process. Mm-hmm. It's a democracy. It is predicated on the basis that you have the right to suffrage, and in exchange for it, you say, hey, I like this candidate, I like these issues, and I'm going to vote for it. So in exchange, it is a legal quid pro quo. I will vote for this if this is somebody who I like. I will vote, and based upon whatever those issues may be. Oftentimes what happens is the Democrats, firstly, they control, again, they work alongside Republicans to make sure that third-party candidates don't have the ability, firstly, to gain any legitimacy through the media side of things, because it's all corporate and legacy controlled. Then you have, on the other aspect of it is, from the direct standpoint, that they work to remove candidates and issues that's off the ballot that actually oppose their ideologies. The Democrats in itself, they are anti-democratic. I've called them out numerous times, and they should still need to be called out for even the process of how Vice President Kamala Harris has assumed the next position to be running for president, right? When you take into account that President Biden, everyone had knew for years that he was, I don't want to utilize the term incompetent, but he was not adequately equipped or prepared to be in this be in the office. He barely could even handle major events on an international stage. I mean, he's calling world leaders, the opposing world leaders, in middle of wars and conflict. I mean, it just illustrated already he was not in his place, and he didn't know what he was doing. But that administration has been sending, hurling billions of dollars to genocides. So I mean, yeah. You have to call it out on what it is, because the Democrats, that's their game. They create this notion that a third-party candidate or third parties are spoiling it for them. But they're spoiling it for themselves. They're the ones who are in power. How can you be in power right now for the last 3+ years, about 4 years, and you have given billions and billions of dollars to the state of Israel, while it is directly committing a genocide, right? And I was one of the first ones as a candidate to call it out. My local media made sure they ignored all of these things. I'm the only candidate, the only veteran that was in a race that was calling it out. I said I was an independent early on, saying that we needed to go against the two-party duopoly. Unfortunately for us, the Green Party in the state of Ohio did not have this status. And that's a whole nother discussion in itself there, is why didn't they have their status? Because Democrats and Republicans worked together to make sure that it was more difficult for third parties to maintain their ballot access. And that's a whole nother discussion in itself.
Yeah. So one of the things, and thank you very much for that. One of the things that I'm checking right now, as far as your opponent, I think your opponent is Sherrod Brown.
Yeah, so it's U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, as well as the Republican is Bernie Moreno. And I'm currently a write-in candidate because we filed a massive lawsuit. That was another thing. We had to get 5,000 signatures to be an independent because the third party wasn't on the ballot, right? Because we had no Green Party. The Green Party, you would have to, if the Green Party was in its status, you would only have to get about 250, 500 signatures, right? As a minority party. But as a majority party, the majority parties, they only had to get 1,000 signatures. But if you were to have to run as an independent, you had to get 5,000 signatures.
Wait, hold on. That's
Yeah.
weird.
Why
in the world is it? Because the Democratic Party, Republican Party have a lot more infrastructure in order to be able to get the 5,000 signatures. So why shouldn't it be more incumbent upon them to have to get the 5,000 signatures and you get the 1,000? That doesn't make any sense.
This is that's the argument, you know, that you see in some of the court cases is that you have to establish what is a modicum of support and whatnot. And then we also, like I said, we fought our case into the federal courts, and we filed our lawsuit against the state saying that they had unconstitutional measures as it pertains to ballot access, stating that you should never have independents, that you have to produce 5 times the amount that the major parties have to produce. And that was exactly the understanding, is that they have the legitimate infrastructure in place to easily flourish and gather those signatures. In our situation, we just got slightly under the 5,000 margin. And I mean, we were moving it all across the cities. But then, unfortunately, we didn't have the 5,000 verified. So on March 18th, when we went down to Columbus, we had all our packs of signatures, and we went through them and said, we're just slightly under. It's probably better that we file this as a write-in officially, to know that we're going to be in this race. And then we file the official suit. And that's what we did. We filed the official suit after. And when we filed the official suit, we went into the courts for a few months. Unfortunately, it didn't go in our favor, and they said that we're still going to be a write-in candidate. And that's something that it sucks. But this is the thing that we were saying. We're not playing spoiler. If we were playing spoiler, we wouldn't be taking this serious. This is a serious deal. We're talking about right now who is going to be leading over our nation. I mean, leading over our state as a senator, and who's going to be actually sending the resources to our people here to make sure we have housing fundamentally for all of our Americans, that we have health care. And I even noticed that amongst the Democrats, Medicare for all was something that actually mattered for a while ago. Now it doesn't even almost exist anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't. And yet, one thing I noticed is that, you know, the third parties, and particularly the Green Party, which just for full disclosure, I am co-press director for the Jill Stein campaign. But my thing is like, we should, you know, they're the only ones that are really talking about not just a Medicare for all single payer healthcare system, but also even pushing for a nationalized healthcare system in totality, just like they have in the UK. So I don't hear anybody else really talking about that outside of, you know, parties or independents outside of duopoly. So it just goes to show where the Democratic Party in particular will use these different types of policies that are really winners. They're no-brainers for the American people, and yet they'll use it as a tool to get you to vote for them. But then once those votes are cast for them, they go, new phone, who this? And so this is exactly what they always do. And and this is why I'm sick and tired. You know, we're pushing for people who are actually going to be fighting for the actual policy, not just rhetorically, but also, I don't care if you get black eyes, bumps, and bruises, and you're limping away, as long as you got the fighting. That's what matters. And I think a lot of people are missing sight of that. With that being said, speaking of fighting, I would like to go to your policy positions.
Okay.
And I'm going to go line by line because I would like to cover and get your thoughts on different ones. So one of the things I appreciate about you, Tariq, is that in your policy position, you came in hot. You came in hot. You said anti-war and ending the military-industrial complex. Homeboy, you had me at ending the military-industrial complex already. So it says here, Tariq Shabazz advocates for reducing military spending and reallocating resources to address domestic issues. By advocating for a more peaceful foreign policy, he aims to decrease military intervention and prioritize diplomacy and international cooperation. Shabazz believes that redirecting funds from the military-industrial complex towards education, healthcare, infrastructure, and job creation will better serve the needs of American citizens and promote a more equitable society. So you say here you will scrutinize defense budgets for its necessities, promoting the well-being of all service members and veterans, while advocating for the reduction of appropriations to correspond with the American agenda of peace and prosperity on an international stage. You talk about, it says you will support and defend the U.S. Constitution and will continue his life. You as a veteran have supported and defended the U.S. Constitution. So,
and I could touch on that too if you want me to, that portion really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in terms of when I say about how I want to scrutinize defense budgets, again, as I talked about the military-industrial complex, I got out of active duty from the United States Navy in 2019. And the moment I got out of active duty from United States Navy, I ran for become the House of Representatives against the former Secretary of HUD, Marcia Fudge. I came in second place to her. We never debated. We never got to be in the same space. There was 4 candidates in that race. And in that, I directly talked about the importance of ending the military-industrial complex. So I worked primarily in maintenance. And in working in maintenance, I was able to see, some of the, horrific things pertaining to like the cost of supplies, all of these things from the logistical operation standpoint, right? And they gave me a much broader understanding of that our U.S. military, our defense system in itself is, again, it's highly bloated. It's a highly bloated operational budget. And then there's a lot of propaganda that creates an impression that they're taking care of our service members and our veterans. So we lose 22 veterans a day due to suicide, right? And that's something that I've dealt with suicide in my own time of service, of service members who were near me who have committed suicide. And it's so adversely to the people, to the morale of everyone around. And one of the things you take into account is how are we doing so piss poor while we're spending, $700, $800 billion for defense? Well, how do we do that? It's because all of the money is going to these defense corporations, the Boeings, the Lockheed Martins, the Raytheons, we know the names. And for the individuals who don't know some of those names, we have to understand, why is it that a 5-star general who's president left office and said, we need to do something about this rising influence that the defense industries were having? And this is something that still, since that day, right, since Eisenhower left, it has seen an increase of resources that are going substantially into the defense industries, and the defense industries profit off of war, right? So as it pertains to them profiting off of the war, it is only going to lead to an increase of more dollars. Like when it comes to the war in Ukraine and Russia, I've talked about this slightly, is that the U.S. knows that it's posturing itself that it can continue to spend and hurl as much money into the Ukraine-Russia war for a couple of reasons. One, they view it from a military standpoint that as long as Ukraine and Russia are fighting, the number of lives lost from Russia's service members only helps the military capabilities of the U.S. That's their mindset. And as a result, it's not seriously taken into account that we're just hurling dollars into people just killing each other, where we could have easily worked to try to stop this conflict. We should have never been providing the state of Ukraine cluster munitions, illegal in over 100 countries. That's something, when I talk about the scrutinizing, I would never allow something like that as a senator. I would never allow the fact that we know that Israel is committing a genocide. I would never allow another dollar to go to their country. Their government itself is corrupt. It is committing mass violations, right? And that's what I mean about scrutinizing. And just in that sense, do I support suspending the defense budget up to 10%, up to 20%, honestly? More than up to 20%, because we're projecting in the next 10 years, we can hit up to $1 trillion defense budgets. So yes, I'm heavily in support of cutting up to about 20% of the defense budget. And that's something I'm looking to do, cut about 20%.
Okay. So another thing that is in your platform as well, because you had mentioned what's going on in Gaza, It says, you will not support the war in Gaza and has calls for a ceasefire. He will not commit to further military aid to the state of Israel, as it would be condoning the mass killing of women and children. So would that also mean an arms embargo, which has been called upon for Vice President? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not another dollar that should go to the country at all, because it's only contributing to advancing more of its offensive capabilities. And as it's advancing more of its offensive capabilities, we're seeing it on everyday scale right now. A regional war that has escalated beyond, as they stated, was to go and seek back their hostages, right? And then now they're in multiple other countries waging warfare. And how are they doing this? Is because the United States posture is enabling it, right? When we move our ships and our carriers over into those regions and saying that we're there in just in case, we're greenlighting it. We are saying that this is acceptable. And I know as a senator, President Biden, Vice President Harris, or if it is her being president, or if it's Trump, if it's Jill Stein, everyone is going to have to come to us and ask for those resources or ask for these mobilizations. You don't just say we're going to move this here in supporting of this conflict when we know it was wrong from the jump. These are the areas where we have to address that too. And I don't want to talk too much on that. And not talk too much, but I want to sit for a question you had. Sorry.
Yeah. In fact, I'm not going to play this video. Okay. But I do want to share this because I have to be careful with warfare. But I will show a still of this. Right now, this is actually from Sky News. Sky News is actually reporting that Iran has actually launched missiles right now into Israel. This was taken about an hour ago. So this just goes to show that this Israel is really escalating things to a fever pitch within the region. You have Iran now retaliating against Israel's murder of Nasrallah. You now also have retaliation against Israel for not just what they've done in Gaza, but for also what they have done in Lebanon. And so this is turning into, or dare I say, we're already in a World War III. It's just you don't really know the name of it until after the fact. So sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I would say, yeah. I mean, I looked at numerous reports not a couple years, but a year ago, when you see multiple countries that were talking about the importance of having their militaries be operational, or at least they could be fully optimized by like 2027. When you hear things like that, I mean, we know that's the war efforts are ratcheting up, and then we're seeing actual hot conflict, right? For hot, we see that there's actual physical conflict. People are dying. Human beings are losing their lives. And then we also have to take into account the other things that happen as a result of of war. Is how many individuals who are on long-term healthcare or healthcare related support that now they may not be able to get those critical supplies. Now we take into account, like when we look into Gaza, right, that the state of Israel, its government was still blocking aid is going in. So that is going to cause, immense number of other deaths that occur that is not directly through by way of the arms that were used. This is other areas of the war that happens, right? When you block people from receiving resources like that, that's going to cause more deaths. That's going to cause death tolls to increase. And that is something that needs to be taken into account, that the state of Israel wasn't just indiscriminate in its pathways of what it was doing. It was very deliberate. It's harming them, the civilians. It's directly harming them, and they're aware of it. And on the next step about that, it's one of those areas where, for us as citizens, we have to take into account, how do you get to this point? It's because of the point that I made earlier, that we have rising super political action committees that are working for the better good of of another country, right? Foreign interests. They should, like AIPAC is a political action committee, super PAC, that should be recognized as a foreign super PAC, right? It's directly advocating and coming to our country and telling getting all of our leaders. I don't know what kind of dirt they have on all of these people, but I mean, they're lock in step with almost everything that they want, and it's disgusting.
Yeah. So would you be willing to either sponsor or draft legislation that would force AIPAC to register as a foreign agent if elected senator?
Yes, and that's something I've touched on within this year as well, that I would absolutely do that, because I believe AIPAC is what it is. I mean, we know it's foreign. It's working as a foreign agent on behalf of the state of Israel. It's bribing politicians to literally just look the other way, give us more money, and we'll do whatever we want. And all you have to say is that you will always defend us. You will always support our right to defend ourselves. And I served in the U.S. Navy, and I still call out the fact that our U.S. military it violates internationally, right? Imperialism is something I call out all the time. So why would I not call out a state of Israel what I didn't even serve in, and I'm not a citizen of that state? I don't understand what's happening here by so many of our public officials, elected officials. It is really illustrating that something very sinister is happening beneath the surface, and it's not being addressed publicly.
Yeah, I honestly personally would say that anybody who gets money from any of the Israel PACs are compromised, but that's me saying that, not you. So I just wanted to clarify. So moving on, you say that you also support the diplomatic relations within the region that has strategic plan for peace, to end the apartheid, the establishment of a two-state solution recognizing Israel and Palestine, which I know that a lot of the Palestinian resistance actually supported for the most part.
This is a tough one, right? This is a tough one because the question is, how do you end the situation, right? Mm-hmm. For me, again, you can't go back to, as they say, prior to October 7th, right? 2024. Mm-hmm. You still have to take into account that there was a vicious occupation that was occurring for years prior, right? Where you had just a few years ago, Gaza had 3 million people. Then it went down to 2 million people, right? And then in the sense of it can't just, we go back to normalizing the situation. The state of Israel must be held accountable in the international bodies. So I will, as a senator, work directly, whatever through my powers, to make sure that on the international body that we recognize that the state of Israel was committing terrorism, has committed terrorism, and has committed a genocide. So wherever that leads to, whether that's potential shifts in governmental leaders and arrests for certain individuals like Netanyahu, I'm in support of his arrest. I believe it was actually reprehensible that he came to the United States of America, was basically given the red carpet, come into our country and speak with such conviction regarding the matters, as if that he's on the right side of history. And then also to go and parade it again on the international body, where he has, warrants for him. I mean, it's sorry.
No, I feel you, and to be honest with you, I actually agree with your frustration and anger in regards to this subject, because honestly, I am sick and tired of seeing the carnage that has been done to people within the region, because you have a genocidal maniac like Benjamin Netanyahu, who continues his project of Greater Israel in order to just take over the region. And I spoke about this before, but if you actually if people actually Google about Israel, well, really the UN finding that they have billions of tons of liquefied natural gas as well as oil off the coast of Gaza, and as well as the Greater Israel Project and the plan to build a Ben Gurion Canal, then you realize that this more has to do with just money and resources than it ever has to do with anything religious at all. Because to be honest with you, this is not anything about religion. This is pure settler colonialism. Basically what happened here on this land and what the United States has done throughout the global South, particularly in Africa. So That's the way I see it.
It's always interesting how we describe the nations internationally when we make the distinction of the global north, global south, or developed states versus peripheral states, right? And then we have to take into account what are the major issues or that's attenuating the global south from advancing. Is the global north, or Western powers extracting raw materials from those countries while making sure that there are horrible loans on the books, whether it's through IMF, World Bank, whatever the case may be, where it makes it so much more difficult for those countries in themselves that has all these raw materials that are absolutely necessary within the developed states for us to develop major technologies and things in that nature. And you see it. This is an issue that can't just get, we can't keep glossing over. And that's what I mean about the imperialism of the United States of America still with the Western powers. But I know we had a little time. I wanted to kind of touch base on massive domestic issues that I want to really address, Senator.
Yeah.
Can I touch on reparations first and then move to the other ones? Because I think oftentimes we skip. This is a tough topic for people to move on, and I think that I need to provide that adequate amount of nuance on it. All right, so for everyone out there, what is the importance of passing reparations for Black American descendants of U.S. chattel slavery? Well, first, you have to take into account that since the inception of the United States of America, this country was predicated on creating a bottom caste status for Black Americans. And this is something that is proven in evidence prior to the actual formation of the U.S., right? In the colonial Americas, we take into account that slavery was something that was sanctioned and recognized that it was perfectly okay. The women that were enslaved, it was perfectly fine for, enslavers to rape the women and then to have offspring that were considered not the status of the father. And this is something that was different in other places, right? They didn't have to have the status of the father. And as a result, that means that it greenlighted the mass raping of women, Black women, and to have offspring children that you can just consider them that they're going to be chattel as well, right? So this is something that I address on a number of ways why it's important. The United States built up mass power, influence, wealth through the creation and the sanctioning of U.S. chattel slavery, right? Let's talk about the political power that was provided. When you look into the state, the United States of America now, you have 3 governors that was ever Black. How does that happen? That is another area of it. You have absolutely attenuated political infrastructure to be able to be yielded towards Black Americans. And this is shown through its every iteration of the government building up, right? So when you have the Constitutional Convention in 1787, this is after the Articles of Confederation. If anyone who's paying attention, who's reading it, after the Articles of Confederation, they said, what do we do about the slaves? Even though we need to build a more central government. The state government system was too fractured. It didn't work. So they said, we need to do something to make it more central. So they created an elected president and established the U.S. Senate, right? So, and even in this practice of establishing these things, this was to further the influence of white Americans. This was not to create or establish an equitable balance. This was to further it, right? It means that now you can have senators for a state that represent the entire state, and their influence yields immense impact, right? So you have to take into account that this reparations must be paid because the federal government created the bottom caste status, and it's harmed us on a multitude of levels. As I stated, politically, economically, socially, all throughout this country. So politically, it's evidence of how I stated that since this country kept building power, we can talk about the 3/5 compromise. We can even talk about as we go into the 1877 compromise. The 1877 compromise is what essentially failed Reconstruction right after the 13th Amendment. When this country failed the Black Americans, it left them into state-sanctioned terrorism. And this is the reason for why you must still provide this restitution to address the harm that was for U.S. chattel slavery, the failed Reconstruction era, and then to leave our Black American people into state-sanctioned terrorism into the South. And then ultimately, which I don't call the Great Migration, I would say that ultimately led to the great displacement of Black Americans from the South going into the West, upward into the north and western states as a result of making it so much more difficult for Black Americans to advance. Then you can take into account some of the massive terrorist attacks that occurred that the federal government, which again is the ultimate sanctioning body, did not do enough to protect, provide restitution for any of these people. Tulsa, Oklahoma still is a topic of the century right now. We have still multiple living individuals who were impacted by Tulsa, Oklahoma, and still did not receive reparations from their state. And that's from their state addressing the harm that it done. So on a federal level, this is what we must do. Federal government must establish reparations that's consistent with even with the United Nations states. Compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and restitution, right? And what I put together was a reparations plan that addressed that. One is a monetary reparations to address racial wealth gap. It was at a bare minimum of $14 trillion, which is addressing the racial wealth gap. And this isn't something I just made up off the top of my head. This is something that was established by way of Dr. William Darity and Dr. Dr. Kirsten Mullen, who established From Here to Equality, which was stating that these are some of these tangible ways that you could address providing reparations. One of them is the cash restitution aspect. So I say you provide at minimum $14 trillion to address this, as well as Section 2 addresses the land grants to Black Americans. And why is the land grants important? For one, this country failed to deliver on its 40 acres of a mule. Right. This is something that this country still not just failed at delivering the 40 acres of a mule. It created policies that furthered the land inequitable outcomes, like when we deal with the Homestead Act. And this is something on my page I touched base on. The Homestead Act provided millions of acres of land to white Americans, as well as immigrating white Americans into the nation, which has established intergenerational wealth for white Americans. These are just areas that, again, that's one aspect of how land was distributed. And then we take into account how much of the land that has been adequately taken through from Black Americans, not just through physical violence, but strategically being utilized through tax systems or other ways to rob Black Americans of their land that is rightfully theirs. So this is important that our government has to establish these protecting forces. So Section 3, a permanent protective status for Black American ethnicity, and that is important, right? So that's extremely important. So that's to protect these people permanently, to look into all of these future cases, there are things that are occurring. Section 4, political disparities and representation. This is the areas where I talk about the importance of establishing automatic districts, Freedmen districts, which is highlighting when you see those lawsuits that are happening where people are suing, saying, according to the 14th Amendment, this is supposed to have a majority minority district. We're saying specifically that it's not supposed to be a majority minority that this is that Constitution, that amendment was predicated on. It was supposed to be establishing for those Black American people so they could establish political footing, and that was robbed of them. So as a result of it, this country still must provide the adequate amount of what is Black American or Freedmen districts for them to actually matriculate into the House of Representatives and so on and so forth, as well as from the federal government down to the state subordinate governments. And the
Well, just a question. So as far as just to make sure that we have clarification.
Yes.
When you talk about reparations for Black people who are descendants of slaves, there are many people from many different regions who say, I'm a descendant of slaves. My descendants of slaves come from Jamaica, or my descendants of slaves comes from Haiti, or my descendants of slaves comes from Brazil. Are you referring to all Black people within the United States, or are you going towards a specific group of Black people for the reparations?
Yeah, so this form of reparations is specifically to address the Black Americans who were impacted by U.S. chattel slavery, and I understand the sentiment oftentimes nationally that's going on, where, hey, well, there are other groups that were adversely impacted by slavery, and that's not what I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that this didn't happen and it wasn't egregious. What I am addressing is that the U.S. federal government sanctioned the practice of the slavery that happened to Black Americans, which we understand that since it sanctioned it, we understand that, again, even going back to the United Nations, is that this government has to address the harm that it did specifically to those people, to those groups of individuals, their descendants. This isn't, anything negative towards other groups that were adversely impacted by slavery. This is specifically saying this is the policy to address the harm to Black Americans who were harmed by U.S. chattel slavery, and it will be consistent with things like, for instance, internationally, you have public policies like CARICOM. CARICOM only impacts individuals who are in those Caribbean states, as opposed to Black Americans. The Black Americans cannot take a piece of any aspect of any of that, right? So it's not saying that it's a bad thing. It's saying that this country has to address this fundamental harm that it has done on these Black Americans, because it has continuously have left them in some of the most horrific conditions. When we talk about the racial wealth gap, when you look at the Brookings Institute's research that talks about the racial wealth gap this year, and that came out this year, Biden said that the racial wealth gap has improved. And that was absolutely false. He was able to do that, check it quickly. He said improved in the last 20 years. The reports illustrated that no, it did not. It said that Black wealth has increased, but it did not increase proportionally to white wealth, which indicates that it did not increase in terms of the decrease the racial wealth gap, which would mean that that was a flat out lie. And why is it that the racial wealth gap does not shift naturally? Is because it was manufactured. And these are areas, again, we have to address the fact that these harms were manufactured specifically to Black Americans, specifically.
Yeah. So this is one of the reasons why, I bring this up is because you have a lot of Black people that'll say, well, what about people who are, my family that are immigrant Black people who have came here from, you can name a different African country. It could be, Ethiopia, Mozambique. It could be, Gambia. And they'll say, well, I was impacted, from, the prison industrial complex, or, racial profile and things like that, which is, I try to specify that is more that's more for post Jim Crow, post slavery grievances that has to be also correctly addressed as well.
Yeah.
But when it comes to reparations, that is a lineage based
basis, and that's what I have on my policies. It's lineage basis. Yeah. I think oftentimes on the internet spaces, it gets really, the discussions they break down, they don't really stay nuanced on why it's important that it must be lineage basis. Yeah. It must be lineage basis for a legal standpoint. Firstly, you can't establish a policy that uplifts one race or the other. So when we establish the lineage-based reparations, it's specifically saying this policy is for those who were harmed. Right? It's not for all Black people, right? Because it's saying, no, we know that right now, currently, the U.S. Census will say somewhere around there, there's potentially up to 40 to 50 million Black citizens, right? Race-wise. Mm-hmm. However, all of those citizens would not be eligible for the reparations for the individuals who were harmed by U.S. chattel slavery, failed Reconstruction, and that so on and so forth. And then another point I want to add in is that when you immigrate into a nation, you do immigrate into a country understanding that the historical things that has happened in this country, you are not necessarily absolved from it. And I hear this this is not from Black immigrants specifically, but this is something I hear in terms of people who immigrate. They'll say, well, my family immigrated here in the 1920s, 1930s. And they'll say, well, I was never a slave. You were never a slave. We shouldn't have to pay for it. And my answer to that every time is your people still immigrated into a country that committed mass harm to Black Americans. It doesn't remove or absolve the fact that that country, federal government, still is on the hook to pay it. right? And that may make individuals uncomfortable, but guess what? Just like whenever we see our legislators are voting and passing legislation that absolutely we disagree with all the time, this is something we have to understand, is that this government has to provide that repair. That's it. I mean, it's pretty simple. When I deal with, and I touch bases on different types of reparations all the time, we can go back to the Emancipation Proclamation of DC Act. Abraham Lincoln, the president at the time, signed a law that said, I'm going to provide restitution to slave owners to relinquish their slaves. And in that, they were paying. That was their game plan, is that providing monetary or economic assistance, that would be a way to loosen or reduce the tensions, militarily speaking, because more people will be more willing to get rid of their slaves. And they only provided a few dollars for those who were enslaved to immigrate out of the country, not to actually receive their reparations. Then you can go into various forms of reparations that Native American tribes that have received, or you could address the fact that in most recently, the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which was passed for Japanese Americans who were adversely impacted by internment camps during World War II. I would be wrong if I say I don't think that those Japanese Americans deserve reparations, because they did deserve it. Their people were held in internment camps under the guise that they were spies. And then it was land grabs, all of these other things that were occurring during that process, right? So that would be wrong for me to say that. But oftentimes the sentiment or the rhetoric becomes extremely anti-reparations when it's under the when it's understanding is for Black Americans, right? Even though Black Americans are the only group that was held in bondage in this country. No other group can say that that happened to them in this country. That is the wealthiest nation on earth, that's been able to hurl billions and billions of dollars everywhere else while saying it can't pay Black Americans for what they've done to their people.
It's kind of interesting that you mentioned that, because a lot of times people will say, well, you weren't a slave, so therefore you're not owed. And the funny thing is that you have these companies that will try to collect the debt on the person who deceased from their next of kin. And I'm like, if that's the case, then these companies should be barred from ever trying to collect any debt on the deceased. Like,
Yeah,
yet they do.
it's just incorrect. It's incorrect. It's one of those areas, again, whether or not people agree specifically with my policy of providing reparations, and I believe that my policy is generally consistent across the board with others. There are some other leaders in the reparation space who are advocating for a $60 trillion measure to address the cash restitution aspect of it. And even when we take into account that number, it sounds like it's so staggering. You have to take into account this isn't something that has to just be paid in 1 year, right? It could be something that could be done over a 10-year span. And in general, for the economic standpoint, when we deal about how inflation will be impacted by it, again, I would refer to many individuals to check out and listen to scholars in in the economic forces about this, because they directly already highlighted how we could potentially reduce the inflationary risk associated with passing such a measure to provide reparations. And those are areas of those leaders. I'll make sure I bring these people in as I'm implementing and drafting the official bill. I think that that's what also gets really conflated, is that a senator has immense amount of resources, support, staff at their, right at their fingertips whenever it's necessary. So when it comes to drafting the legislation about this will be something that will be direct. It'll be driven by the data. It won't be just someone making up numbers. It's driven by the data to make sure that we can adequately address the harm. And as I said, we must provide the economics, must address the land, and we have to create a Freedmen Bureau, which is going to be that organization that's the glue that makes sure that all of the interests on behalf of those Black American descendants are receiving what they're owed. And that's my reparations plan. And everyone here, please check it out. Check it out, please.
Mm-hmm.
How much time do you have left?
I can go for another good 15 minutes or so.
Okay. So if I could, I want to just say, I think that we touched a good basis on the reparations. Medicare for all is something that's still a massive one for me. I don't have a large area on our page about it, but specifically, yes, I'm absolutely in support of single payer coverage. Medicare for all it was recognized years ago when I ran for the House of Representatives. I talked about the importance that there was a CBO estimate in 2020 that suggested that implementing Medicare for all then would have only cost about $0.7 trillion, so $700 billion in terms of in its implementation of it, but it would have reduced so much costs across the board. And where we're facing that we're still dealing with so many of our Americans, the debt, right? Massive debt is associated with medical debt, right? So we still have to take into account that we need to work on potentially canceling large scale of the debt for many of our Americans, so they can actually breathe and not have to deal with that. It's horrific. If we can go bail out and provide all these billions of dollars to these other countries that are waging wars, like for instance Israel, that has the ability to provide those luxuries and things like that for their own people, that means we should be making sure we should be doing that for all of our Americans here. And that's something that I'm going to be very direct with and very much in support of once I get in office. And I won't be one of those individuals who's going to get in office and then say, oh, I just care about quality health care. No, single payer coverage. Let's move away from this. This system does not work. Absolutely does not work. And I'm full stop on that one. I'm not doing that anymore with it. When it comes to, if you have any question about that, because I didn't want to just keep talking. I'm sorry.
No. As far as Medicare for all, I think the radical in me says that Medicare for all is a step in the right direction. I am more for a nationalization of the healthcare system in general, because there is also, with Medicare for all, there's room for private hospitals and clinics and different medical facilities who operate on profit motives to charge exorbitant amounts to the government itself. I think honestly, it'll also be more affordable for the government to have a nationalized healthcare system. And once you take the entirety of profit motive away from the medical system, then it also makes it so that the focus is on care instead of profit at all. And so that's just the radical in me. But I do like Medicare for all because it is a huge step in the right direction.
Right. Thank you. And if I could, I want to touch on what our vets. I want to do some shifts, especially pertaining to the GI Bill, right? The GI Bill in itself, we need to get back to a place where when our veterans get out from service, transition from service, where they don't need to go and qualify for housing, right? That's something that is a massive problem. They should not have to go and seek out their own to get qualifications from a bank to provide them a loan. If you're going to say you have a zero interest loan, the federal government needs to go back into making sure that all of those veterans, once they transition from service, that they can go back, they can get access to a home. And this is also going to be consistent with my plan in general of making sure that we have housing as a fundamental right for all Americans, but in terms of how the pots are divvied up, to making sure that veterans, as they transition out, we have the adequate amount of support that we know they can get straight into housing to get from their life of service. Increase the amount of transition assistance program related materials, as well as healthcare coverage. And this is something that's going to cost, some more dollars from us in appropriations. But I think we need to do away with the way we have our lapse of coverages for our service members as they leave service. Regardless, they should have full health care, full dental. And this is something that people may not like, but guess what? We need to stop. If we care really about our people, you wouldn't send so many of our people into these situations, into conflict, into all these things where they come home and then now we have to take care of them. So how do we do that? We need to make sure that we expand those transition services. We need to make sure we expand more grants so they can build their businesses. And also for the job guarantees. These are areas where once you come out of service, there should be no reason why we have veterans who are homeless on our streets. No reason why we have veterans who don't have access to jobs. These are some things that is imperative that our agencies work more directly to ensure that those services are provided and that all of our service members have access to jobs once they leave. Um, and yeah, consistent across the board with our housing first initiatives throughout the country. I want to make sure that that's the new direction of how we move. Is that we're no longer accepting that individuals can be homeless in this country. Um, when I think of like when calling, 911, I think if I see a person on the street, that's a need. That's a matter of public safety. Seeing an individual living on the street, I don't care what we're saying. That means that we're failing in our public safety because we've established a structure that enables our citizens to not have housing security, and
Yeah.
that is something that I'm not in. I'm no longer going to allow this. I fought for housing as a right in almost every campaign that I've ever fought for. When I ran to become a Cuyahoga County executive to lead over 1.2 million people in 2022, I established that we're going to have a housing as a fundamental right within the county, and that was how I was able to achieve 35% of the vote to lead over the 1.2 million people, which would have been the youngest person ever to lead a major county in the state of Ohio out of the 88 counties, 1.2 million people. And the state of Ohio has just over 11 million people. So when some people ask me questions like, what would put you into this place of being here? Well, I was just short away from actually leading over the second largest county in the state of Ohio, which will, I believe, puts me in the room with any of these public officials to address the needs of the people.
Okay, so as far as the housing first model, from this is something that I also is very close to my heart. It says rental assistance and eviction reform, expand rental assistance programs for more families, and reform eviction laws to provide greater protections for tenants. Establish a right to counsel in eviction proceedings to ensure fair legal representation for all renters. One of the things I think that a lot of people don't know is that for instance, when it comes to rental assistance, Section 8 is actually on average has a 5-year waiting list. And so a lot of people, and also the criteria is so stringent that, you could still be in poverty and not qualify for Section 8. And to be honest with you, and maybe some people may look at me wrong for this, but if there is a man in the household, that also would bar, unless that man is considered to be disabled, that if there's a man in the household, then that also precludes them from also being able to get housing assistance, even though, there's a lot of reports coming out now. There's a lot of people who are going 6 to 9 months without being able to get a job. And so they're living in poverty because they can't get a job. And, you have a lot of these companies that are saying that they're hiring, but they're not.
And that's a horrible thing. That's such a horrible thing. I know this as a vet. I got out of the service with a bachelor's degree, and I was just almost done with my master's. I finished my master's in 2020, so I had just finished it a year after I got out of the service. I mean, I had one of the most terrible times transitioning, trying to find gainful employment. And I said, whoa, I was told I had all of these amazing skills, while I was in the service, but now they're not transferable to anything. And even with having a master's degree, it took me another 2 years before I got an official position doing something that was actually related to any of my degrees or any of my skills. I mean, I got out of there with all these back issues, and I mean, I'm a married man. I said I can't sit myself down and not work, so I'm working in places lifting stuff, menial labor, and I'm okay with that. Everything I got to do what I got to do to take care of my household. So for me, we're looking at it from that standpoint. If I have a master's degree and I'm going through that, I know this is it's just horrible what's happening all across the board. And NASA was one of those furthest myself of saying we have to shut it down. We have to shut it down. This structure is not working for the people. It's absolutely not working. And when you talk about Section 8, I mean the horror stories I hear talking to individuals that they're waiting for the lottery, as they say, waiting for the lottery. And then when they finally get it, then there's the issues with the home that they're trying to get into. There is so many things that are absolutely making it much more difficult. It's making people give up. People are giving up at times.
Yep, absolutely. I have one more question, more policy question, if it's okay if I can ask. Okay. So we're kind of touching on education now. What is your thoughts and policy on education? Because as far as I see, a lot of people have been talking about the cancellation of student debt within the country. And there are policies, for instance, Dr. Jill Stein's policy is to make up to 4-year college tuition free in public colleges and universities, as well as in trade schools. What is your policy position in regards to education, especially higher education?
Well, first one is I support the cancellation of student debt. I'm not on that side that people are arguing where, well, if we're canceling student debt, well, who's going to pay for it? We this country again established a rather exploitative education structure that takes a massive advantage of those who already are dealing with the financial burden of transitioning into either the 2-year or 4-year institutions. So if you're an individual who need access to those critical loans, obviously it's going to cause more harm for you over the time, where your interest rates that they have, where you're paying almost so much of the interest, you're looking at, whoa, I've looked like I should have paid enough of the payment already, but or the principal, but this interest is so growing that I don't see I could ever pay it off. I mean, so there's some areas where I would look to that, even with bankruptcy, I would say there's some changes where student debt should be able to be again added back into bankruptcy. That's one of those areas where you could actually remove it. That's one, because that was taken off by our legislators years ago. I would say two, in terms of the cancellation of student debt, absolutely. And I do support Jill Stein's plan in terms of the 2-year, 4-year institutions, as well as even the for making sure that we're getting our individuals into the trades, right? And this is an area where, as senator, I will support those things. I will advocate for the passage of those legislation in those areas, to be direct. So yes, and I hope I answered your question. And if I didn't, I can answer it more.
No, you very, very well. I would urge somebody like Joe Biden to pass the Higher Education Act, but I don't ever see that happening. Which would also do a cancellation of student debt. So, look who holds a huge amount of student debt is people that look like you and me, and a lot of Black women that hold a lot of student debt. And so that would also be a boom, to a subset of the Black community. Yeah. People like me it wouldn't affect, because I actually never, stepped foot in college. So for me, it wouldn't really affect.
And real quick on that too, the only issue I do have at times is there was this false impression that when President Biden first was trying to roll out the cancellation of the student debt in some sense, that this was going to be a reduction of the racial wealth gap. And those are the areas where the nuance, where I say, well, that's not adequately true, because of Black Americans, only 25% of them are actually into the higher education system, right? Which we talk about, was it up to 40 million borrowers or whatnot? So you just take that into account. We're not all of those borrowers. So yes, there's an increased likelihood that when we are borrowers, we're probably Pell Grant recipients. So there would have been increased impact positively for Black people in some areas. However, when you looked at the overall standing, statistically speaking, it was not something that was going to reduce the racial wealth gap, but it was something that was specifically going to assist greatly for individuals who have sought out higher education and who sought out actual loans for those processes. So I was one of those individuals who saying I support it absolutely, but I just had an issue where how it was presented, and I think that was one of those ways that the Democrats do. And I will end with this one quick too. Republicans have caught on to something when it comes to Democrats. They know that they can just tagline certain policies that the Democrats suck at actually really addressing. Like, for instance, what Trump did with the project, he did Kamala Harris Project 2025, taxpayer funded reparations. We've never heard her current candidacy directly say that they're going to pass reparations, but they're putting them on pressure, saying that, well, look, are you going to actually pass it? And they're making it to show how bad they are, right? On two sides. Which one is it? Are you really for the black people? And then on the flip side, they're riling up their base. They're anti-reparations, right? So the Democrats are failing on such massive proportions that they're not even taking it to account. You have Kamala Harris in that debate. She said, I'm supporting more fracking. I'm going to be doing all of that for all of that, right? I mean, it was actually mind-boggling watching that debate, seeing that Trump, firstly, he has his lies and all the things he does, but Kamala Harris, the red carpet was rolled out for her to say everything that the special interest groups in America really want. And it was just like, she's the greatest candidate of all time. That's how it was presented. And this is the problem we're having, which I'm supporting third-party candidates. I will not support the current president, current administration, and I will not be supporting Donald Trump. And I'm telling everyone out there in the state of Ohio, do not support the duopoly. Do not vote for either party. And unfortunately for Jill Stein in the state of Ohio, there is an issue associated where I don't believe she's going to be on the ballot anymore due to an issue where when Butch Ware was selected, they had Anita Rios on, so they had an issue that caused it may actually not count her votes.
Yeah, that's a big cluster mess. I will have to get more of the details from Jill Stein's campaign manager, Jason Call, on that one. But unfortunately, there is a mix-up. I'm hoping that they can get that sorted out, but I'm not sure if they'll be able to have it sorted out in time, especially when they have to print the ballots. So,
yeah,
as far as that goes, if in case they may end up having to write in Jill Stein, and as well as you, I'm hoping that, they can get that sorted out. But I'm on pins and needles with that one. I'll just say that.
Understood. Again, I'm thankful that you afforded me the opportunity to express, some of our issues. I really do.
Of course. And, I deeply appreciate a lot of these policy positions that you have put forth. I would like to, go a little bit further, but due to the sake of time, I'm unable to. But I'm sure that will there be more policy positions in the next few weeks that you'll be putting on the website?
Yeah, so so you can look on some more things being expanded, especially the questions you asked pertaining to student debt, as well as my stances regarding to rights to access, because I've been asked about this before, which I do support rights to access. But these are areas that wasn't on our pages that people have, many of our individuals in the state have said, we would like to see some of these, things added onto it and wanted to see more issues expanded. So that's no issue for me. I've made numerous stances beforehand on these issues, which is publicly known in the state of Ohio that I've done. But I'm going to make sure that my website also expands to illustrate some of those other things as well.
Yeah. Some of the other ones, it will be ones like environment, especially pertaining to climate change.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And as well as the issue of immigration as well. I know it's a very hotly contested issue. But as far as, you and I both are aware, especially of the military industrial complex and the foreign policy. I mean, to be honest with you, we all know where the source of the undocumented immigrants having to flee their countries is coming from and why. So I think, when you touch on
that's a powerful area and where I think we could be talking for hours on that, because understanding that what the United States impact is in these countries, we do have to address the fact that it is causing massive mobilizations of people leaving where they're at, where they're living, right? And they're taking a trek across various countries across Latin America, coming up through the state of Mexico, and then going into the U.S., to the United States of America. And it's causing, massive issues right? Where the city governments who have, established themselves as some form of sanctuary cities or whatnot, they cannot handle the load of how many people, sheer load of how many people are into those areas. Those municipal governments, there's an area where, again, I was a candidate to take over a whole county. So they have to have balanced budgets. If they don't have a balanced budget, something bad happens. They lose fiscal control. You lose fiscal control, it goes to the state comptroller, fiscal treasurer, whatever it is of that state. And that's something that is a massive concern when you see across some of our major cities. I would love to talk about this in another depth, but again, I'll expand these areas on my issues page.
All right. Thank you so very much. And just to let everybody know, I had put Tariq's link for his website in the chat as well. So if you guys would like to, you guys can all go to Shabazz for Senate.
Absolutely.
And you guys can actually look. And also, of course, just to reiterate, you are running a writing campaign in Ohio. So if you guys need to just go straight to his website, you get the accurate spelling so that you guys can write it down, put it on a Post-it note, and stick it to your chest.
Absolutely.
All right. So, and of course, it is such a pleasure to have you. Really great to have this conversation and go over all these policy positions. And I can't wait to have you on again, including after the election as well, so we can continue to talk about these issues, because I know you ain't going nowhere.
No, I'm definitely not. We're here. So thank you so much again. I appreciate it for all the individuals who are watching this today and who's watching this tomorrow. This is firmly about addressing the needs of the people. My campaign is specifically about addressing reducing conflict abroad and addressing the longstanding problems that has been caused by the U.S. federal government. And how do we do that? We remove these career politicians and we put in new leaders. So thank you so much, and I hope you all have an amazing day. Vote for that brother this November 5th, 2024.
Thank you very much, Tariq. I'll see you next time. Take care. All right, everybody. So what did you guys think? I think that his policy platform is pretty solid. If you guys have not already, I put the link in the chat. I'll put it in once more so that you guys have that. If you guys are in Ohio, or if you know some people in Ohio, then you guys can submit that to them and say, hey, here's somebody that's outside of the duopoly, and here's their policy platform that actually is better than the Democrat and Republican parties, so that you can actually write them in and actually get somebody who is better. And, think about it this way. The uncommitted movement had over 100,000 signatures that were uncommitted. People wrote uncommitted in Michigan against Joe Biden. Even though that was a primary, that's huge. How many people can write in Tariq Shabazz? It's not that hard to write in. And then you can actually write in a independent senator and somebody who is actually for popular policies that resonate with working and poor people. There you go. So with that being said, I just wanted to give a big thank you to Tariq Shabazz for joining me today. And go ahead and give a like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much. So we're going to go into the comments in the chat, and then we will shout out patrons and go into our next segment. So we're going to be starting off with the Rockfin. The Rockfin? The Rockfin. So we're going to get into it. All right. So let's go here. All right. So shout out to Roger for coming in here and saying, sorry, no money today, Jay. That's okay. But what Tariq forgot to tell you is the reason why the threshold is so high for independent candidates to get on the ballot in Ohio is because registered independent voters outnumber everyone in the state. You see, Ohio is one of 20 states where voters don't register under a party, but for some reason, politicians get to run under a party. You can literally throw a rock up in the air and it would hit an independent. Why? Because everyone is an independent in those 20 states like Ohio. Also, I'm on board for Tariq's arms embargo, but he doesn't need to sponsor a bill for it. We already have a law in the Leahy Act that calls for it, named after Vermont Senator Patrick Leahy. Just push the president to obey the law. That's also a really good point, Roger. If you already have laws on books, there's no need to create a new law. I forgot about that. Thank you very much for reminding me. Now he wants to make Israel register as a foreign agent. Bet. Let's do it. Yeah. Hemp Carr says, is he related to Haj Malik Al-Shabazz? I do not know. That's a good question, though, Hemp Carr. I don't know. I wish I knew the answer to that question. But thank you very much. Let me check on the Rumble side to see if there's any Rumble rants. All right. I think last time I checked, I think we're good. So WV Marks says, greetings, JB and comrades. Thank you very much, WV. Is it West Virginia? Nice to have you. All right. Thank you very much. All right, let's get into the general chat here on the tube and say hello to everybody that's in here. This is interesting from John Tebby. Says, congrats on joining the Steinware campaign. Thank you. I'll likely be in the replay due to nap time constraints, but a couple of questions for Tariq. When talking to others, how do I differentiate you from Brown? Well, just point to the policies, especially as far as the willingness to do an arms embargo and wanting to end the apartheid in places like Israel. Is Sherrod Brown, is he willing to go and be as bold? Is he? And also when it comes to a housing first model, is Sherrod Brown willing to do that? Is he willing to buck the Democratic Party platform and go according to what is, more or less the right thing to do instead of going and aligning himself with the party? So, one of the things I always say is go to their policy platform and compare and contrast. That's one of the best things you can do. John says, I live in Cincinnati, I think it is. Went to university in Cleveland and have 4 kids. I saw your anti-war housing, Medicare for all, and reparations platforms and love it. What can Ohio families expect from you or your initiatives? Oh, that's a good question, too. I wish I had time, but thank you very much for that, John. Tariq will probably be watching this on the rewatch. We have Tim Price, who is a RBN Orlando chapter member, saying, as always, great guest and great haircut. Thank you very much for that, Tim. Appreciate it very much. Let's continue on in some of the comments here. Let me see. Oh, yeah. Arif says Reagan's 12th term. Unfortunately, yeah, that we are in Reagan's 12th term. Terry Connolly says, good afternoon, JB and comrades. Good to see you in here. We have Jacqueline says, congratulations on becoming Green Party co-press director. Thank you very much. Let me see. Thank you very much, John, about that. I appreciate it. Kate Max says, looking particularly handsome today. Oh my goodness, you guys are about to make me blush. Bryce says, morning, JB. What up, Tariq and chat? All right, good to see you in here as well. What else do we have? Johnny Davis says, Brother Fauntleroy, thank you very much about the fresh cut. All insane, good to see you in here as well. I agree with this, Jacqueline. Says Tariq is a much more impressive interviewee than Kamala or Donald any day of the week. Not sure what the Republican and Democratic candidates running for the Senate will be like. We're probably better than them too. Yeah, I can pretty much, yeah, you can take that to the bank. Sabrina B says, great interview. Thank you very much. This is a good question. Jacqueline says, should reparations be paid at once or should reparations be spread out over a certain term? It's actually quite easy to just spread it out over a certain period of time. Like, for instance, and I was talking to some friends about this, I think a couple of days ago, but back in 2020, in March of 2020, the United States had actually dumped $4 trillion into the market at once. With that being said, the United States government, the Treasury, the Fed, they can come up with $4 trillion out of thin air just because. Now, a lot of people would say, but JB, that will cause a huge amount of inflation if you were to, let's say, we go by the $16 trillion over the next, if we did $16 trillion, but we did it $4 trillion a year, 4, 8, 12, 16. So, over 4 years, $4 trillion, right? Could that be done? Yes. But to combat inflation, because the federal government does not need your taxes in order for it to operate. Taxes are really a way to take money out of the system in order to prevent inflation from happening. So instead, you raise the taxes on the wealthiest Americans. And by wealthiest Americans, I'm talking about the people who are multimillionaires and billionaires. And this can be done with not just taxes on income, but also taxes on wealth, taxes on things like stocks and bonds and different types of holdings, and taxes on different types of expensive property. You can actually create taxes to do that. Also, taxes on havens, if they want to try to pull that money out, you could try to tax them heavily on putting money outside of the government, outside of the purview of the government, or trying to take money outside the purview of the government. I'd also say taxes on you can try to recuperate some of that so that it doesn't cause a huge inflation to happen as well. I'm not a tax guy, but I'm just throwing some ideas out there. But as far as reparations, it can be done over a span of time. It doesn't even have to be $4 trillion over 4 years. It could be $1 trillion over 16 years. But the thing is that the United States was able to $1 trillion overnight and then dump that into the markets. You know what I'm saying? So they could definitely look. We'll take a payment plan. We will take a payment plan. Okay, just as long as you pay us back for what the repair, right? And a lot of times people say, well, you guys weren't slaves, and it's like, yeah. But our parents were, and you guys still never, our descendants were, and you never paid them back. So of course that money will go to us. Number one. Number two, you guys never paid us back for the redlining that you've done. You never paid us back for the Tuskegee experiments that you've done. You never paid us back for the mass incarceration that you've done. You never paid us back for what you put us through as far as the Black Codes and Jim Crow. So therefore, it is not just slavery. When people go, "Oh, you were never slaves," this is how you know that they don't think about the crimes that were done to us at all, because the only thing in their mind is, oh, slavery. They don't ever think about Reconstruction, Jim Crow, Black Codes, redlining, Tuskegee experiments, environmental racism. They don't never ever talk about that. They don't talk about these things. The disparities within healthcare, all these different things, the torture that a lot of female enslaved have went through as far as being experimented on in order to develop gynecology. They never talk about that either, right? So when we talk about all these things that we are owed for, they never want to talk about, they always say slavery, but they don't ever want to talk about the other things that also entail what we went through. I think that's also a really important part of the conversation. And so we're owed recompense or restitution for that as well, for the inherent trauma that we have inherited as a people because of what they did. And yes, Kate Mack says, no one in this country should be homeless or hungry. I absolutely agree. Rondo says, Uncle Robro, y'all is a whole Bama backlighter. All right, good to see you. Killier Grigor says, hi, Jackie. Nick just wrapped up trying to catch all of RBN. Thank you very much for jumping on over here into the party. Michelita says, thank you both for sharing and doing your work in real life, not just on some Twitter X page. Oh, man, thank you so very much. Thank you very much for coming in, Dwayne. Good to see you. Michael Pan said, I'm excited to see Tariq Shabazz running for office. A lot of people are. We have Notori coming in saying, hi, Dwayne. Good to see you. Cobra Commander says, at once, it's my opinion. If at any moment it gets agreed on that it should be a payment plan, you'll never see it, and most certainly never see it in full. That's why we have to change the system, in my opinion, so that we can. The Coldest Jenkins says, they don't act like this towards red Native Americans, European Jews, or Japanese Americans getting compensatory justice. Yeah, they honestly really, but you know what? This is why people like us who are Black Americans, freedmen, we need to start abandoning both parties in order to have leverage over them. And then the person who actually wants to help us get this recompense, this repair for us, then that's who we stand with. Right now, you have different third parties that are doing it. You have people like Dr. Jill Stein, you have Dr. Cornel West, you have Claudia de la Cruz, you have Jasmine Sherman. There's many who are actually for that. You know, we can stand with them instead of standing with the duopoly, because the Republicans damn sure won't do it, and the Democrats won't ever do it either, because they don't want to be held to that. They don't want their feet being held to the fire. Good to see you, Trauma Queen. Thank you very much. So let's get into the shout out for the patrons. I just want to give a shout out to the patrons on Patreon, for without you guys, I would not be able to do this work. So let's go into it. And here are the tiers. All right, everybody. So shout out to Mega Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Jaybefaunters, Comrade, Solidarity, and JB members. And shout out to new member Lee A. Royster Jr. We got a junior in here. Good to see you. Thank you so very much. And we really appreciate you becoming a member. And this helps me keep the lights on, literally. So just to let you guys know, my channel is demonetized. In fact, on the 10th of this month, it will be a whole year that I've been demonetized. So if you like to support the channel, you can support via Patreon or PayPal. Thank you very much from the top and bottom of my heart. Let's get into the next segment. I want to address Roland Martin. Because we got to talk. Because Roland Martin addressed Black men, and I need to have a conversation. I just want to talk. I just want to talk. All right? That's what we're going to do. And in this conversation, we are going to focus on something I think that is necessary. It has been almost a week since the state murder of Marcellus Khalif Williams. More accurately, Imam Marcellus Khalif Williams. And a lot of us have had a lot to say. with that being said, I want to share this because it was an issue that I think is important that we touch on. Marcellus Khalif Williams was a innocent black man that was murdered by the state. Even the DA, as well as many others in the state, were saying we need to at least stay the execution. We need to, really, he should be released. It is absolutely not right. He is an innocent man. There were calls to the governor. The governor said no. And as well as the U.S. Supreme Court said they didn't even want to hear it. They said no. And so a lot of people were calling to people who are running currently or the current president to try to push for clemency for somebody like Marcellus Khalif Williams. But not a word was said. I want to share this first before I address what Roland Martin said. Shout out to my comrade on RBN, Rome. He had this to say, and to be honest with you, I co-sign what Rome says here.
Fucking minutes. That's all we asked for was for 5 fucking minutes. We didn't ask you to hold any bills. We didn't ask you to send in the troops. We didn't ask you for any of that. We just asked you for 5 minutes from our sitting president and our VP, who's running to be president, running on black issues. But when another innocent black man is getting killed by the state, you are nowhere to be found. And actually, I found out that we can't even type his name out on your HQ without it being taken down. This shit is disgusting. It's funny how she's black and collard greens, but here we are. Here's your time to shine, Kamala. And I know you bitch ass niggas, the government don't work like that. It don't work like that. No. They have power to do something about this. Even if it isn't ink to paper, they have voices to put not only the millions that's watching this around the globe, but billions of people eyes on this. And they can sit here and watch the state make excuses for lynching another innocent black man. And this is not the only innocent black man that has been killed by the police or the state this month. We couldn't even get 5 minutes from you, and you think I'm going to spend 5 minutes in the line voting for you? Fuck out of here. I am so sick of 5 fucking minutes.
Yes, Rome is correct. Once again, all we wanted was 5 minutes for you to at least make a statement, to put pressure on the governor to stay the execution of an innocent man. And they couldn't even do it. Kamala Harris, who is currently running for president, was quiet. Not a word. Apparently, someone like Roland Martin takes issue with us calling out Kamala Harris for calling out Kamala Harris. So Roland Martin said, "This is for all the black men and women criticizing Kamala Harris about the Marcellus Williams execution. This was a state crime and there was no federal jurisdiction. But y'all aware that prior to Donald Trump, there were 3 federal executions in 60 years. Trump executed 13 in 6 months. Save that bullshit for someone else. This is why I'm supporting Harris Waltz. Y'all need to learn, read, and listen. Hashtag facts matter." So we're going to go over what Roland Martin said. And I'm going to be addressing what he's saying because I think this is important, because he is going to be attacking people from the right, but I will be criticizing Roland Martin from the left because he never addresses those of us who are on the left. Let's get into it, shall we? All right. Take it away, Roland.
Black men, I've been seeing a whole bunch of y'all tweeting about the execution in Missouri. I've been seeing a lot of y'all tweeting about Kamala Harris. She ain't say a word when that black man being put to death. Y'all overlooked the fact that it was a Democratic DA who wanted the man taken off of death row. Y'all.
So, with that being said, if it was a Democratic DA that wanted him taken off of death row, then that should have made it easier for Kamala Harris to go, you know what? A Democratic DA wanted him taken off of death row. I agree with that. We need to take Marcellus Williams off of death row, and we need to stay his execution. She could have just said that. Boom. Easy. Right? But she was quiet. That was a layup. That was all net. No backboard. And yet, shall we continue? Yes, let's continue.
I'll forget that it was a Republican attorney general who stopped him, a Republican governor who stopped him, a Republican state Supreme Court who said move forward with the execution, a Republican U.S. Supreme Court that moved forward.
Which also adds to my point. That was a layup. That was easy because she could have said the Republicans want to keep this going. I say that if the facts bear out that this man is innocent, we should stay his execution and he should be free. That would have been a layup for Kamala Harris, and yet she didn't do it. How many minutes are we in? How many seconds are we in? We are 51 seconds in, and Roland Martin's already proven my point. Already. She couldn't even collaborate with the other Democrats in order to help stay this man's execution. Let's continue.
But you may be asking, well, Roland, why are you bringing up executions and Donald Trump? Now, y'all remember, this was the ad that he took out right here. And right now, first of all, this is Yusef Salaam's response, but I need y'all to remember, this is Yusef Salaam responding to Donald Trump. Donald Trump wanted to kill the Central Park Five. He said if the death penalty was they deserve the death penalty. Okay, why am I bringing that up? Donald Trump lost in 2020. Y'all know what he did? He told Bill Barr, who could we execute? Again, I want all y'all brothers. I've been seeing y'all tweets. I've been seeing y'all posting. I want all y'all brothers who've been talking all that trash. I want y'all to answer this for me. How many people have been executed on the federal level by President Biden, Vice President Harris?
Now, Roland. Let me go to my notes. I got some notes. And I would like to address that claim from Roland Martin. Now, Roland, if you want to talk about executions via the state, let's talk about the war crimes from both Biden and Donald Trump. You see, here's the thing, Roland. I'm not one of those black men that's on the right that you're addressing. I'm actually one of those black men on the left, right? The thing is that I also am against a Kamala Harris presidency as well as a Donald Trump presidency, because guess what? I see them both as the same. Why don't you? What did Kamala say about the state of Israel? She said that she is unequivocal and she has unconditional support for Israel and will continue to support, which means she's going to continue to send weapons and aid to Israel as they are committing an extermination of Palestinians in the region. You see what they did in Lebanon. So we want to talk about executions via the state. Let's talk about the wars that are continuing under the wars that continued under Obama, the wars that were continued under Trump. Because guess what? You can say that Trump didn't start any new wars, but he damn sure didn't stop any. Okay, so Donald Trump kept the wars going, and then you had Joe Biden that kept them going even further. Oh, well, he pulled out of Afghanistan, but yet how many mercenaries that we got still in places of Afghanistan? How many troops that are still technically there, even though it was a pullout? Look, the Biden-Harris administration is continuing the program of war. They didn't really move the needle anywhere towards liberation and peace at all. So if you want to talk about executions via the state, outside of our borders, it's definitely happening. You see, you can cherry pick, oh, there weren't any federal executions. Yeah, when it comes to citizens within our borders, when Shireen Abdul Akleh was murdered, who is a U.S. citizen by Israel, what did the United States do under the Biden administration? And we could also bring up some of the stuff that Obama did because he's a Democrat. Obama was one of the ones who also had a U.S. citizen murdered. And his 16-year-old son murdered as well. So if we're going to talk about what they're doing as far as human life is concerned, Harris does not have any say whatsoever. Thankfully, I'm not a Trump supporter, so I can address this without having to defend or be on the defense for somebody like a Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump also deserves to be tried for war crimes too. Let's continue, y'all.
0. I want all y'all brothers,
Okay.
and some of y'all sisters. I've been seeing some of y'all tweets too, especially y'all FBA ADOS folk.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
How many federal executions took place under President Barack Obama?
Maybe not within our borders, but outside of our borders, I can think of at least 2. At least. Anwar al-Awlaki and his son, they were executed by Barack Obama. They were U.S. citizens. Oh, but you want to specify within the borders. I don't care. Inside the borders, outside the borders, Barack Obama also executed U.S. citizens. So, you really want to go there, Roland? See, this is the problem with the Democratic Party. You see, what they'll do is that they will cherry pick the data so that it makes their party look good. Like, for instance, they'll say, well, we at the Democratic Party, we actually cut child poverty in half. That's not the flex you think it is. Child poverty shouldn't exist, period, in this country, number one. Number two, that child poverty cut in half, that expired. You allowed it to expire, so therefore, child poverty goes back up. So with that being said, you cherry pick the data for a small subset and then put it out there as absolute fact, when in fact, that's not really how it goes. So we talk about Barack Obama. He cherry picked the data and said within the United States borders, but doesn't want to talk about Anwar al-Awlaki and his 16-year-old son, a minor that was murdered via drone strike by Barack Hussein Obama. Now, I'm not defending at all Donald Trump, because Donald Trump damn near got us into World War III. So it could be very true. The 13 federal executions. Yeah. So Donald Trump also should be, his feet should be held to the fire for that. But also, Donald Trump was also the one who almost got us into World War III by murdering a general in Iran. Qasem Soleimani. He almost got us into World War III with Iran. So, yes, of course, Donald Trump also deserves just as much scrutiny as a Joe Biden, a Kamala Harris, a Barack Obama, a George W. Bush. But he's defending Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and Barack Obama. All right. Let's have some more.
0. Now, I want all of y'all to now answer the question.
Okay.
How many executions took place under Donald Trump?
Mm-hmm.
13. Anthony, go to my iPad. This is a Rolling Stone article. Trump's killing spree. The inside story of his race to execute every prisoner he could.
Mm-hmm.
Look at this right here. Black man and black woman. Before 2020, there had been 3 federal executions in 60 years. Then Trump put 13 people to death in 6 months. So if y'all are posting tweets trashing the Vice President Kamala Harris, she didn't speak up loud enough, she didn't do nothing, why y'all ain't mentioning this?
I'm mentioning it right now. Donald Trump is a reprehensible individual. He has no business being the commander-in-chief of this country. Neither should Kamala Harris. Neither one of them. Also, when we say silence is violence or silence is complicity, and Kamala Harris was silent, oh, but that doesn't apply to Kamala. Oh, we can't apply that to her, even though she has an immense amount of influence because she's the vice president of the United States. But you say, don't do that to her. See, here's the thing. I don't expect anything like this from a JD Vance. But the party that used to have on this platform that it was against capital punishment, I say used to because they quietly took it away. I expected the Republican Party to not care. So this is why nobody was saying JD Vance's name, because we expect JD Vance to continue and not make any excuses for it and just continue on with the execution, because we know the type of people that people like JD Vance and Donald Trump are. But far be it upon us to assume that because the Democratic Party had on their platform that they were against capital punishment, and then an opportunity to stay in execution, to provide clemency for a man that was about to be executed, and yet the Democratic Party went, shh. Kamala Harris went, shh. Let's not. Let it go. So are we to just assume that Kamala Harris was against it, but she couldn't speak, got her tongue? She couldn't tweet it out. She couldn't do a statement in her many press conferences that hopefully she didn't have her earbuds in so she can avoid, but she could have said something for 5 minutes, like Rome said, to influence so that somebody like Marcellus Khalifa Williams would not be executed. On RBN, I spoke about the execution or the soon-to-be execution of Marcellus Khalifa Williams a month before it happened. I spoke about it. So if I knew about it, Kamala knew about it, and she could have said something, but she didn't. Tim Walz didn't say anything about it. He kept his mouth shut. So if silence is violence, if silence is complicity, which we on the left agree, Jill Stein spoke about it. Dr. Cornel West spoke about it. Kamala Harris didn't.
Well, why are y'all not mentioning that after he lost, he was racing to kill people? He literally told Bill Barr, let's take him out. Let's go. Lead paragraph, Rolling Stone. In the final moments of Brandon Bernard's life before he was executed by lethal injection at a federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana on December 10th, 2020, President Donald Trump picked up the phone to entertain a final plea for mercy on Bernard's behalf. The call was not with Bernard's family or his attorneys, nor was it with representatives with Bernard's family, nor was it representatives from the Justice Department's Pardon Attorney Office, who had recommended just days earlier that Trump spare Bernard's life. Rather, the call was with Jamal Fincher Jones, better known as Paul the Don, a music producer responsible for hits like Ludacris, Pimpin' All Over the World, and Nicki Minaj's Anaconda. Jones didn't know Bernard, but he had publicly endorsed Trump for re-election, and that, Bernard's advocates had correctly suspected, gave him the best chance of getting the president's ear. Trump took the call, but unfortunately for Bernard, it was too late. The president had days earlier spoken with the family of the victims in Bernard's case, a young couple who had been kidnapped and killed, and promised them the execution would go forward. I'm sorry, he told Jones, I can't do it. I'm going to scroll back up. Representatives from the Justice Department's Pardon Attorney Office had recommended just days earlier that Trump spare Bernard's life. So for every single one of you brothers and sisters who wants to criticize Biden and Harris for the state execution in Missouri, there have been 0 federal executions under Biden-Harris. There were 0 federal executions under Obama-Biden. There were 13 by Donald Trump in 6 months. And before I go to break, I'm just going to leave y'all with this right here. Before 2020, there had been 3 federal executions in 60 years. Then Trump put 13 people to death in 6 months. Now you tell me, who should be the 47th president of the United States?
Joe Stein. Oh, you thought I was going to say Donald Trump. No. See, the violence done by Donald Trump and the silence and complicity and violence done by Kamala Harris, 2 good things can be true at the same time. This is why I love the fact that I'm not in a duopoly. This is why I love the fact that I do not have to defend reprehensible behaviors from people like a Donald Trump or a Kamala Harris. Because neither one of them should be commander-in-chief. Neither one of them should have any power within our government at all. They don't even qualify to be dog catcher. And so you're coming and pointing to the guys that are like, oh man, I'm gonna vote for Trump. And why hasn't Kamala actually said anything? But some of us who are criticizing publicly, we're not Trump supporters. We're not on the right. I'm on the left, baby. And I do not support the duopoly. And I can point out both Trump and Harris's transgressions on this front. Because I'm not a Democrat shill. My opinions are not based on, the Democratic Party. And staying with in that circle so you can make as much money in the algorithm as possible because it actually is more lucrative to stay within the duopoly. To me, the mission matters way more than the money. You want to see how much money I make? Go to my Patreon. You'll see. It's not nowhere near what you probably get. The point is that I can actually call out Kamala Harris for her silence. Why can't you? Let's finish this up.
Trump or Harris? that ain't even a contest. It's absolutely Vice President Kamala Harris.
No, it's not.
I'll be right back. I'm rolling button.
No, you won't. Now, I'm going to share this with you. Because Kamala Harris's silence is pretty indicative of how she actually feels. I want to share this because there's some things that a lot of people do not take into consideration. And, well, I want to. Let's take a look at this. Let me enlarge. So, Attorney General Kamala Harris was even worse than you think. The blurb says she was less interested in justice than she was running for her next office. All right, so it says anyone interested in justice was entitled to feel a Chris Matthews thrill up their leg when Tulsi Gabbard went after Kamala Harris for her record as state attorney general in the Detroit debate. By the way, this was written in 2019, so this was 5 years ago. Gabbard pointed out that as California's attorney general, Harris refused to allow DNA testing that would have exonerated a death row inmate and prosecuted more than 1,000 marijuana cases, as though as a candidate, she later laughed with radio hosts about her own pot smoking past. But that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Harris's tenure. There's also the case of Daniel Larson. After 11 years of incarceration, a federal judge ruled that he was innocent. Harris kept him in prison for 2 more years while she appealed the decision on a technicality. She argued that Larson hadn't provided proof in a timely manner. This was not only bad conduct with regard to wrongfully convict. This is not her only bad conduct with regard to wrongly convicted citizens. My 2 indirect experiences with Harris's department during her tenure as Attorney General from January 2011 to January 2017 revealed a similarly callous regard for justice. This first was a pro bono habeas investigator trying to free an innocent young man named Eric Frimpong from prison. The second was an author chronicling the wrongful civil prosecution of a California company by both State of California and the Department of Justice. And both the deputy attorneys general working for Harris, if not at her best, seemed less concerned with doing justice than keeping the conviction count up and scoring a payday for the state. The case of Eric Frimpong would never not break my heart. Eric had come to the United States from Ghana in 2005, recruited by the University of California at Santa Barbara to play soccer. He learned English, made friends, and did well in school with his dual math majors, and impressed almost everyone he met as charming, bright, and ingenious. In his second season, the center midfielder at the UCSB to the national championship, he led the UCSB to the national championship in his first and main sport. Hailed as a hero, was drafted by the Kansas City Wizards to the Major League Soccer, and planned to play professionally after graduating in June. But less than a month later, in February 17th of 2007, a freshman accused him of sexually assaulting her on the beach below the cliffside apartment she shared with several other students. So he said, I spent 2 years investigating every aspect of the arrest, trial, and conviction, doing what the defense attorney, Robert Sanger, and his paid investigator didn't do. During trial, Sanger was unfamiliar with the prosecution's evidence forwarded to him under discovery, so he missed a myriad of contradictions and self-refuting statements that would have allowed him to easily undermine the prosecution's case. And because he never visited the sites pertinent to the case, he didn't understand that the prosecution's versions of events was logically, chronologically, and geographically indefensible. Worse, he essentially stipulated that the case's veracity without offering the jury any reason to doubt it. No wonder they voted to convict. A decade ago, I spent 20,000 words citing the evidence I'd uncover to explain why I'm certain that whatever happened to Jane Doe, the perp couldn't possibly have been Eric Frimpong. Without question, he had been railroaded by racist cop and conscienceless assistant district attorney interested in not in justice, but in convictions. And then he'd been abandoned by a do-nothing defense attorney. Everything I found was compiled into a 700-page petition for a writ of habeas corpus filed in Santa Barbara Superior Court in December of 2010. The petition didn't just raise reasonable doubt, it established Eric's innocence. What I hadn't suspected until then was that trial judge, Brian Hill, was equally worthy of contempt. As a presiding judge of the court at the time, Hill assigned himself to the petition and then broke judicial canon by trying to refute the substantial evidence in the petition with his own research. One example should convey the flavor of how perverted was his denial of the petition. So he goes over the denial. So he continues here, it says, when you see this sort of thing once, maybe it's just a slipping through the cracks. When you see it over and over, it begins to look more like someone's plan for career advancement. And advance Harris did. Not Eric Frimpong, though. After serving his 7-year sentence, Eric was deported to Ghana, where his math degrees ought to have guaranteed him a secure future. Alas, as a lifetime registered sex offender, he can't work for any multinational company, nor for the same reason he can't even coach soccer. He is left to scrape by as best as he can. In short, his life was ruined. So he goes over the cases that Kamala Harris and how horrible she is. I also want to share this regarding Kamala Harris as well, because I think this is also important. So somebody in RFK Jr.'s camp was actually talking about Kamala Harris, and I think this is actually very interesting. So let's go into this right here. This is actually kind of funny. Starts off kind of funny.
Swamp, folks, is going to be so empty. Such clear water. You're going to swim in it with your kids right in Washington, D.C.
Now, if y'all believe that, I got some beachfront property on Mars I can't wait to sell you. So Robert Kennedy's plan to create unity actually involves helping us dismantle corporate capture, which is the actual swamp. And there's a really interesting example of that involves both Trump and Harris that I think we should dive into. So this example of corporate corruption involves a guy you might have heard of named Steve Mnuchin. Well, Steve Mnuchin got into a lot of trouble because he short sold people's houses by the tune of like 80,000 via foreclosure. He was the foreclosure guy. So when Kamala Harris was the attorney general out there in Northern California, she was urged strongly by her Consumer Protection Department to prosecute Steve Mnuchin because of his corrupt foreclosure business. And she had a record of holding big banks accountable before, so it seemed like this is what she would do. But she did not. And the reason why she didn't is quite interesting. So one of Mnuchin's partners was One West Bank, and one of the shareholders in there was a dude you might have heard of named George Soros. Him again. The reason why she didn't pursue it could have something to do with Mnuchin donating large sums of money to Harris's campaign at the time. So now that Harris refuses to prosecute Mnuchin, guess who appoints him as Treasury Secretary? Donald J. Trump. Mnuchin is just one example of how both parties are subject to this kind of influence and corruption. And me as a voter, I'm concerned about if either one of them gets into office, what's changed? More and more voters are starting to see this corrupt merger, and that's also as part of driving them to become independents who identify with neither party. And we understand that when we fight each other, these corporations profit. In fact, the former CEO of BlackRock says so himself.
I think what's happening today in the markets is a endorsement of divided government.
If we want to be free from this kind of corruption, it's going to have to start with the voters. We, the people, are going to have to cast our votes for candidates.
All right, so of course, he's advocating for RFK Jr., who is no longer in the race. So you can take that, take away with that. But this is true. So let's take a look. Let's look at the donors, shall we? Donor Lookup. This is why I love this site. This site is such a great resource. Money to candidates. Stephen Mnuchin in Pasadena, California. Employer Citigroup. Date February 10th, 2016. $2,000 to Kamala Harris. Another one. $2,700 from Heather Mnuchin. Kamala Harris. Heather Mnuchin again. $850 to Kamala Harris. That was in 2019. Heather Mnuchin. $850 in 2014 to Kamala Harris. Heather Mnuchin again, $1,000. Heather, yes, to Kamala Harris in 2010. Heather Mnuchin again, $1,250 in 2010. And then another $6,500 in 2010 to Kamala Harris. So the Mnuchins have been busy giving money to Kamala Harris. So we know that she's just as corrupt. Now, let's take a look at this too. He brought this up. This is out of the Huffington Post. Kamala Harris has to answer for not prosecuting Steve Mnuchin. So this came out in August of 2017. It says Kamala Harris has been deemed the Democratic Party establishment's next big thing. They're pushing her as the figurehead of the resistance, the anti-Trump as staunch, strong progressive who relies on her intelligence and empathy to combat the authoritarian belligerence of the current administration. While Harris is certainly poised and intelligent, her progressive credentials are fuzzy, and her past is punctuated boldly by her decision to not prosecute One West Bank and the foreclosure king who ran it, current Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Steve Mnuchin and One West Bank were, according to the memo obtained and reported on by The Intercept, guilty of widespread misconduct in the form of over 1,000 legal violations. The memo was the result of a year-long investigation and asserts that One West Bank operated to intentionally boost foreclosures. The Campaign for Accountability called for a federal investigation of Mnuchin and One West Bank, claiming that they potentially illegal tactics to foreclose on as many as 80,000 Californian homes. Yet despite internal memos explicitly mentioning numerous prosecutable offenses by Mnuchin and company, the California Attorney General Kamala Harris refused to prosecute. She's never given an exemption for her decision, and Mnuchin later donated $2,000 to Harris' campaign. It was his only donation to a Democratic candidate. So as we can see here, that's Kamala Harris. Now, Kamala Harris is so much like Trump that Trump saw something in her, and Donald Trump even donated $5,000 to Kamala Harris' campaign. Now, with that being said, Kamala Harris' campaign sent the donation back. But why would Donald Trump send $5,000 to Kamala Harris? He saw something in her. Maybe he saw himself. So no wonder somebody like a Kamala Harris has been quiet. Because somebody like her probably agrees with Donald Trump a lot more than Roland Martin is comfortable with. At least he doesn't want to say it out loud. So, as a black man, Kamala Harris is no friend to Black people in the United States. Just like Donald Trump is no friend to Black people in the United States. When it comes to our liberation, when it comes to justice, real justice within this country, neither Harris or Trump are fighters for it. They're facilitators of our oppression. And they have shown so much in their record and in their history. So, in regards to what the comments of Roland Martin have said, who deserves to be number 47? Well, damn sure ain't Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. You can take that to the bank. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Go ahead and like the stream. I appreciate it very much. Let's get to the chats, shall we? All right. So I'm going to check on let me check on the Rumble first to see if we have any Rumble rants. If not, then we are good to go. I think we're good. All right. So let me check on the Rock then to make sure that we're good. Let me see. Okay. Let me go into here. Yep, we got chats. All right. So Roger says Congress doesn't pay for anything using taxes. U.S. Constitution grants them and Treasury Secretary the power to legislate new money into existence and coinage powers. So yes. Hemp Cars gave me a link about the ground invasion. Iran launches missiles at Israel as IDF enters Lebanon. Okay, thank you very much for that, Hemp Car. Appreciate it very much. And then Roger says, place that in YouTube chat for everyone, not just love, but repost. Okay. Roger says Trump would have never been president if you guys in Democratic Party. Oh Lord, let me read this. Oh man, Roger, you be putting out something fierce. All right. Roger says Trump would have never been president if you guys in the Democratic Party did not weaponize both the DNC and entire media infrastructure against Bernie Sanders in the 2016 Democratic primary, including you with Donna Brazile feeding questions to Hillary Clinton before their CNN debate, circumventing a fair process and the will of the people. Let's not forget the DNC fraud lawsuit when former chairwoman of the DNC, who is Debbie Wasserman Schultz, admitted on the stand under oath and said that we are the DNC. We do not have to choose who our voters vote in the primary. We chose who we want, irrespective to the voters. Perhaps if you let the process play out fairly, Hillary Clinton would have lost fair and square, and Bernie Sanders would have definitely beat Trump, and those 13 federal executions would have never happened. Serpent eats tail. Oh, that was good, Roger. That was good. Oh, I like it. All right. I'm going to share that. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. So yeah, I will share that into the chat. Put that in the records. That was a good one. Yeah, because the thing is, like, Barack Obama led us to Donald Trump. I don't understand why some of these people are so shocked. Like, oh my God, we got Trump. Well, look what you guys did. You tore us apart with your austerity and warmongering. All right, so Carr says Paul Robinson, he was given an unusual number of electric shock treatments, more than 50, and heavy doses of drugs. Oh my gosh, I did not know this. Okay, so Hempcar, that link from Psychology Today, it says not found. So it's not giving me the link. So might want to check on that. Roger says Yeah, I didn't know about that. Says Roger says Dracula, werewolf, fox wolf, good cop, bad cop, northern racist, southern racist, Satan, Lucifer, Democrat, Republican. Both parties are working against us. Missouri Constitution grants voters to ratify their own amendments to Missouri Constitution. Where's one to abolish the death penalty? Good question. Said make it retroactive. JB, can you search if there has been any past attempts to do so in Missouri? I'm not sure. I don't really have time. I apologize. Real clear politics toss up. Dems will lose Senate anyway. Yeah, they're going to lose the Senate. Yeah, this is why. So 6 toss-ups. Yeah, they're going to lose the Senate. They've done such a terrible job. Hang on, let me share this with y'all. Yeah, they're gonna lose the Senate at this rate because ultimately, oh yeah, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, and Arizona. Yeah, some of these are gonna go red. And the problem is that the problem is that the Senate. I would hope that independents and third parties would get elected to Senate. Like for instance, in Arizona, you have Eduardo Quintana, who is running for Senate in Arizona. I would love to see somebody like him go in, but we never know. Of course, you have Tariq Shabazz in Ohio. So I'm hoping that they can make it, but you never know. So this is why I say if you're voting third party, vote third party or independent down ballot too. Get the duopoly out of the Senate and the House as well. So thank you very much for that, Roger. Oh, this is funny. Non-user says, yeah, but using the term killer is going to discredit posts to some large segment of people, some that could potentially be swayed otherwise. Dumb move. I mean, look, my thing is like we don't like Hillary. Like to the liberals, yeah, but most of us we don't like her anyway. Even a lot of Democrats don't like Hillary Clinton. But it's really just a side issue. Zoe says, so she can prosecute mothers of kids with sickle cell for missing school, but corrupt politicians get a free ride. Right? She got all this smoke. And by the way, sickle cell is especially prevalent within the Black community, by the way. So disabled kids and their parents can get arrested for truancy because of their conditions. She got all that smoke for them. She got all that smoke for Black people, especially Black men within California as Attorney General. But yet she doesn't have any smoke for the Republican governor of Missouri. She couldn't say a couple words about Marcellus Cleave Williams. Namor says, according to Roland's response, he got over 100,000 equipped excuses for every life accounted and unaccounted for in Palestine under our genocidal sponsorship. Where is the heat for Biden administration? Where's the heat? Rondo says, Black excellence, hourglass head, having jackass this Bama Roland Martin so irksome. Damn. Tell me how you really feel, Rondo. Lauren says, how does everyone benefit from a sarcastic Roro attempt to state the obvious? Trump is dangerous and unfit for any leadership position in the universe. Who's listening to Roro? Who? Black boomers. It's unfortunate, but some black boomers are listening to him. Egg64 says it wasn't that way with the people that Trump executed. Egg64 says Roland Martin dude is so obtuse. Nobody just took Marcellus Williams' names out of a hat. He had mitigating circumstances that required a deeper look into his death sentence. Yeah. Let me see. Cobra Commander says, just wait. November 9th is going to be the first black woman POTUS. Glass ceiling shattered. I don't know. Because the thing is that right now what's going on is it's a huge number of people, particularly a lot of Muslims that are now, shifting. Abandon Harris just said to everybody who is Muslim, who agrees, especially with progressive policies, to vote third party. With that being said, I honestly do think that it is growing, and it is a huge thing. And I honestly do think that if Harris were to win, it'll be by a very thin margin. If she wins. If she loses, it's like I blanking on the name, but a gentleman that was on recently that said if Kamala Harris loses, that's also a huge loss for Zionism, because that means she would have lost because of the genocide that she is also a part of perpetuating. So AIPAC wants to ensure that Kamala wins. Even though Trump is with them as well, they want Kamala to win because that means that Zionism wins. But if Kamala loses, Zionism loses. And so it's going to be interesting this November, y'all. Let's do one more. Namor says Roland reducing denial of clemency for Marcellus Williams down to which party deserves more ridicule is odious. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to offer any explanation on the verdict. We are all responsible. Yeah. Cynical says, hey, people, so much ish going down. Yeah, there's a lot going on today. Lauren says, not JB, not fair, not true, wrong. I'm a black boomer and cannot or will not even try to listen to rationalize Roro. The thing is that I'm not saying that my apologies. I'm not saying that all black boomers listen to Roland Martin. I think the majority of his audience is black boomers. That's what I meant. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that all black boomers are watching him. Because a lot of black boomers, they got some sense. They ain't listening to him. But there are, he caters more towards that audience. Am I making sense there? I hope so. I'm sorry. It's the delusion of millennials keeping their Uncle Roro alive. I'm trying to talk to him. I'm trying. Miss Lauren, please. I'm trying. But thank you very much. Cynical says maybe people will care about civil rights when Trump is in office. Maybe. Who knows? All right, everybody. So I have to get going because I have a meeting to get to. But I just want to thank you all for tuning in for this. You guys make this channel possible, and I appreciate it very much. I just want to say that because of the job that I have, it's a little bit hairy when trying to get to other things, especially regarding reading. I'm going to try my best to get into it, but please bear with me for the next 4 weeks as we venture towards the election day. But with that being said, I just want to thank Tariq Shabazz for coming on. And as always, thank you guys so much for being here, as well as shout out to the patrons on Patreon for also keeping this channel alive. So, like I always tell you guys, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. Do all the things if you got them, smoke them if you got them, drink them if you got them. If you ain't got them, then watch something funny because joy is revolutionary, or read because reading is fundamental. I love you guys for watching. Thank you very much. Mwah, forehead kisses, because that's how this brother operates. And also, Don't listen to Roland. Leave the duopoly and actually fight and organize even outside of electoral politics so that we can actually have a decent and dignified future. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.